So, whatever happened to that mid-1980s cult sci-fi classic buddy film Enemy Mine? Let's find out. Movies,
Music and monsters.
Hey guys, Dan Monroe here talking about movies, music, and monsters. Now, before we get started, I'd like to thank this week's sponsor, Squarespace, but more on that later. Oh, Enemy Mine. Dennis Quaid and Lou Gossett Jr. in an extremely well-acted yet slightly forgotten 1985 sci-fi flick that, to me, certainly just didn't get the recognition it deserved when it came out, but has definitely gained a bit of a cult following over the years that is, in my opinion, certainly more than well-deserved. Huge thanks to expert custom model maker James Small for providing a ton of useful information and photos for this video. Definitely check out his website and Substack page all about excellence in model building, link in the description. I never saw this film in the theaters back in the day, but I do remember seeing it, about 300 times on HBO growing up, and I definitely remember that to me it was one of those films that was like Shawshank Redemption, that whenever it was on, for some reason, whatever I was doing, I would stop and watch this film.
Warning, warning, danger, danger!
Yes, what is it, Robot?
I like this film. I have seen it many times. However, in my opinion, there is only one thing truly wrong with it.
And what might that be?
The film has no robots.
Well, no it doesn't.
Perhaps one day someone will remake this film starring everyone's favorite environmental control robot, me.
Or even better yet, Robbie the Robot.
That does not compute.
He means well, just has a tendency to talk a little bit too much.
Oh, the pain.
Now, for those of you who have never seen Enemy Mine, it's essentially the story of two different warriors from two different sides of the battle being stranded together on an alien planet where they must coordinate their efforts in an attempt to not only set their differences aside, but to simply survive. Even as a kid, I distinctly remember feeling like this particular movie was, almost like two different movies that were shoved into one. I mean, you've got the meat and potatoes of the film with the two lead characters forming a bond, learning each other's languages and historical and religious backgrounds, which to me I thought was not only really fascinating, but super fun to watch. But then in the third act, the movie takes almost a complete 180 and becomes this sort of strange sci-fi adventure Indiana Jones style flick right up until the very sudden, almost rushed ending, which always made me wish this movie was, 30 minutes longer than it was. But don't get me wrong, this is a great film with awesome actors, very cool practical special effects, and even something that Hollywood seems to have completely forgotten about these days, a decent plot that actually had a moral to the story. So grab your favorite self-impregnating alien Drac buddy and a bucket of stale popcorn and let's dive in. Now, the entire concept of the film originally began with a short story, or novella, written by Barry Longyear and originally published in the September 1979 issue of Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine. And of course, with Hollywood still on the seamlessly endless Star Wars money-making bandwagon, the production rights were pretty quickly snatched up, and initial filming began in April 1984 with director Richard Loncraine and a pretty small budget at the time of only around, I think, like $18 million. The cast of this film, as small as it was nothing less than spectacular, with Dennis Quaid hot off the heels of another great 1980s sci-fi flick, Dreamscape, God, I love that film. Video on that coming soon. Stay tuned. And the incredibly brilliant actor Lou Gossett Jr. coming straight out of An Officer and a Gentleman.
It took maybe 6 hours to put that stuff on. You couldn't see your face or your eyes. I'll have to learn how to walk flat-footed and get on your feet very gracefully. So there's a little Lon Chaney Sr. in me.
These guys even shared scenes together in 1983's Jaws 3D, but let's just not really talk about that right now. Let's just get that out of here. The basic concept of the story is honestly nothing new, with members of two different warring factions having to overcome their differences and survive. We've seen this plot point for years in Hollywood productions like the Defiant Ones in 1958. Many different classic and modern Star Trek episodes played with this theme, and to me, even though it came a few years later, it reminded me a little bit of Dances with Wolves, and we even got a bit of a familiar storyline in Galactica 1980 in the episode Return of Starbuck. Filming took place in both Iceland and Budapest for about 3 weeks until, of course, the studio executives got involved and decided, in their infinite wisdom, that they just weren't happy with how the film was looking and, more importantly, at least to them, how the studio's money was being spent. So, they shut it down. Okay, I agree that the initial makeup for Lou Gossett Jr. could definitely have been better, and apparently the locations they were shooting at looked a little too much like Earth. So, with both Dennis Quaid and Lou Gossett Jr. on a fully paid hiatus, waiting for the new director, Wolfgang Peterson, to finish up with the film he was currently working on, The Never-Ending Story, Peterson, the director, initially didn't want to do this film at all, figuring it was some sort of a Star Wars ripoff, until he eventually read the script and decided that there was definitely something here to work with. So, director Peterson took a look at all the previously shot footage, hated it, and said, "That's it, right? We're starting over from scratch," something that the money people at the studio certainly didn't want to hear, since they had already spent about $9 million so far. But the executives felt they were just too far in to back out now, so production continued, now in December of 1984 in the Canary Islands off the coast of Morocco and also West Germany, with a new higher budget of around $24 million. One of the things I loved about this film was the way that the two lead characters not only bonded, but attempted to even learn each other's languages and history. Certainly not an easy thing to do, stranded on a far-out alien planet. Certainly would have been a lot easier if they could have just gone to some website to teach them what they needed to know. In fact, that might not be a bad idea for a website all about the alien Drac language. Maybe you'd like to make one, and if you're so inclined, let me introduce you to today's sponsor, Squarespace. If you've ever thought about it, having your own website to promote a brand, sell a product, anything, really, well, Squarespace is a freaking awesome company to help you do just that. Super quick, super simple. One thing that makes it so easy is a brand new guided design system called Squarespace Blueprint. You can choose from super professional looking layouts, then personalize them to your own needs, automatically optimized for every device. And if you're selling something, it's even easier, with tons of really powerful payment tools where you can accept credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay, making checkout seamless and simple. You can upload your own video content to your own video library, sell exclusive content like memberships, courses, music, or ebooks, purchase the domain and launch your very own website all in no time, all in one place. It's super simple, super convenient, Simply check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and even better, you can save 10% off your first purchase of a domain or website by visiting squarespace.com/Dan Monroe. And now back to Enemy Mine. Enormous, beautiful sets were constructed, including this awesome-looking green man-made lake, and they even brought in a new makeup team headed by Chris Wallace and Brian Wade to create a brand new and improved makeup for Lou Gossett Jr.'s character, Jerry. Speaking of studio executives, this can either be interpreted as hysterically funny or pathetically idiotic, but the studio took a good, long, hard look at the title of this film, Enemy Mine, and literally decided that the viewing audience at the time was simply too stupid to fully understand what the title of this film meant. So, in their infinite yet slightly moronic wisdom, they insisted that the third act of the film take place in a physical mine. Yeah, that's why the whole segment in the mine was there. You're just too stupid to understand what the film Enemy Mine is really about. God, I hate studio executives. Even though I know a lot of you thought it was kind of annoying, the weird gargly sound effects made by Lou Gossett Jr. for the Jerry character wasn't planned at all. In fact, he suggested the idea to the director himself because he used to make those kinds of gurgling sounds in his throat when he was a kid, which I honestly really liked because, again, it made me think I was looking at a character from an alien race that I had never seen before. The weird Drac language was created specifically for this film and was apparently mostly Russian in reverse. And those really weird jelly-like green rubbery Drac balls that everybody wanted to put in their mouth. All right, granted, that sounded a bit weird, but in reality, they were just green Jell-O. The space battle at the beginning of the film was pretty cool, maybe a little bit wonky here and there, but they didn't have the highest budget, and I was really surprised to find out later that this dogfight footage was actually done by ILM, Industrial Light and Magic. Never really seemed to line up with my expectations of what ILM was clearly capable of creating at the time, but again, it might simply have just been a budgeting issue. One thing I absolutely loved about this film was the incredibly immersive sets and matte paintings, which really made me think, even still to this day when I watch it, that you are truly on another alien planet. The cinematography with the backdrops that let us know where we are on the planet and where we're going are absolutely stunningly gorgeous. Kind of interesting, the green pond where we meet the lead characters near the beginning of the film was actually the same artificial pond that was custom built for the model submarine shots in Das Boot, also directed by Wolfgang Petersen. So freaking cool. The character of Joey at the beginning of the film was played by Lance Kerwin, who starred in probably my favorite original Stephen King film adaptation, Salem's Lot. Oh man, Salem's Lot. I'm definitely gonna have to hit that one at some point. Stay tuned. The soundtrack of this film, which was conducted and composed by Maurice Jarre, was really sort of interesting, very heavily emphasizing that almost instantly recognizable 1980s synthesizer soundtrack. Some pretty good themes, nothing super memorable, but in the end it did its job, and I do have a copy of that in my soundtrack collection. Production on Enemy Mine concluded just about 7 months later, with the original $17 million budget heavily escalated to around $29 million, and then eventually over $40 million once you include all the marketing that took place for the film. And holy cow, was there a lot of marketing! There was a huge marketing blitz by 20th Century Fox the Sunday before Thanksgiving, with full-page advertisements in over 43 of the largest newspapers in the U.S., tons and tons of TV spots aired nationwide, 3,500 theatrical trailers were shipped to theaters all across America, and over 150 of the nation's biggest shopping malls were literally covered with posters for this film. But sadly, all that rewriting, reshooting, along with the enormous marketing budget simply didn't pay off. The film, which ended up costing over $40 million, sadly only pulled in about $1.6 million upon its initial release, a little over $2.3 million by the time Christmas rolled around that year, and okay, whatever, basically it bombed. And quite frankly, I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, part of me thinks it might have been poor timing. Another part of me thinks that maybe the studios really didn't know exactly how to promote this film. I mean, 75% of this movie is really a very slow burn, heavily emphasizing on things that personally I love, like character development and a really good story. Critically, Roger Ebert gave the film only 2 out of 4 stars, claiming, and I quote, "The film made no compromises in its art direction and special effects, but then compromised just about everything else in sight." Yeah, okay, whatever, Roger. Unfortunately, there were no toys, comic books, or metal lunchboxes, and the film almost immediately went directly to cable and your local home video blockbuster rental store. Okay, but what about all the really cool ships, costumes, and props from the film? Well, there's not much, but there is some. Here's a few cool shots of some of the spaceship miniatures used in the film. I don't know exactly where they are today or who owns them. All I do know is they still exist, which is really super cool. A few of the facial appliances worn by Bumper Robinson as Zamis still exist, which is pretty cool. A Drac alien mask sold in a prop store auction back in 2015 for about £1,500. A very rare full-head Jerry mask was sold by Prop Masters, which was actually used for a paint color test and sculpted by Chris Wallace. A prototype of the Drac ship sold in a prop store auction in 2016 for about £1,800. And this is so freaking cool. Lou Gossett Jr.'s actual arms, teeth appliances, and contact lenses came up for auction in 2017 and sold for only about $1,200. And unless any of you guys know of anybody with any other props from this film that I missed, that's just about all I could come up with. Enemy Mine was released on both VHS and Betamax formats in the 1980s, Laserdisc in the 1990s, DVD in the early 2000s, and finally, a beautiful high-definition Blu-ray release in 2016. If you've never seen this film, or maybe if you saw it when you were a kid and just feel like watching it again, do yourselves a favor. I mean, despite the critical defamation and the box office losses, this is truly a one-of-a-kind, fantastic little film that I not only highly recommend, but more than that is an extremely fascinating character study with amazing makeups, brilliant acting, and extremely immersive world-building sets and art direction. I mean, seriously, just shut off your brain and relive some good old-fashioned 1980s classic sci-fi fun. Enemy Mine was definitely a staple in the 1980s classic sci-fi genre alongside other great, yet sometimes underrated films from that era like Battle Beyond the Stars, Flash Gordon, Hangar 18 with Darren McGavin, Saturn III, Outland, David Lynch's Dune, Starman, The Philadelphia Experiment, and so many more. We could be here all day, but that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive into Enemy Mine, and if you did, and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig. And please feel free to stop back anytime as we together continue our conversation on movies, music, and monsters.
Movies, music, and monsters.